So I want to do three things today. I'm going to talk about where we're at in the state of sales ops. Number two, we're going to talk about some trends that are happening in sales ops that we're seeing today. And then number three, like where do we go from here? What's the future holds? And then we'll sort of talk around what we're seeing as an analyst firm and what we do. So as Dharmesh mentioned, my name is Neil Herrington. I work for a firm called TOPO. We're a research and consulting firm, a lot like a Gartner Group, except we have nothing to do with IT. Everything we do is on the sales and marketing side of the house. So we work with smaller firms like Fullcast, the Alonos of the world, Series A, B, C companies. We know Cowboy Ventures well. We also work with companies like RingCentral or ServiceNow that are sort of in that mid-market tier that are sort of growing really fast. And then we also work with the larger companies like Google, Salesforce, Microsoft. Those are all of our clients. And really our singular motion is how do we help companies grow faster and more predictably? And it's funny, so Dharmesh and I were joking, the number one piece that we go do is first we start to talk about their ideal customer profile, and we start talking about how do we segment, how do we focus the reps in the right way. And as Dharmesh likes to remind us, like as we go in and do this, how do we then focus the reps operationally? And every time we go into a company, it's how do we focus a customer operationally on sort of getting those pieces done. And you'll notice the companies that have done well, the Salesforces of the world, where they can throw a lot of bodies and code at the problem, have done really well at that. And then how do we sort of scale this for other companies? And my personal background and how I joined TOPO is probably familiar to a lot of people in this room. So first I started off as an individual seller. Back in 2001, we had a little bit of a financial crisis. I worked for a company called Paychex. There was literally no tech company hiring. And then I moved to Salesforce back in the day when, before CPQ, we had BlackBerries, we had eFaxes, and then I moved into a small little company called Yammer. We were purchased by another company called Microsoft. I don't know if you guys have heard of that company. And at that time, I realized like there's a difference between selling. One of the vice presidents there was like, look, selling's easy. You can go and just go execute. The real heart of the problem is in how do we think about the strategy. That's what we need to focus on. How do we focus on what customers to go after? How do we make the reps, how do we enable the reps to go after those customers? And that's when I really got excited around how sales ops works. And I think that also runs in parallel with the sales ops as a sort of industry. 10 years ago, there was almost no sales ops. A VP of sales would call up a guy like me at Salesforce and say, I want to buy CRM, and I need to get it in today. And that was sort of his entire job, and we could make it happen. Today, we have now over 22-point solutions that people are buying in sales ops. We have a massive data problem. All of those things now are becoming into the sales ops realm. And the first thing, and the number two shift that I can see what happens in sales ops and why it's now becoming a profession is that the first thing a new CRO does is they used to go hire their best, brightest salesperson. They said, you're coming with me, like I need to depend on you. Now, the first hire that a CRO brings on is their sales ops person. So it's a total fundamental shift. They need to know who's in their wing to say, hey, we've got the data solved, we've got the go-to-market solved, we've got the quota and commission plan solved. So that's very obvious on the shift into sales ops. So it's gone from this backroom piece into this larger, now more strategic piece. So as a result, there's never a better time to be in sales ops. So congratulations for everybody in the room. Like you're on the cusp of something that's really happening in the marketplace, and you guys are going to see this in your career. In the bigger realm of sales tech, so we're right next door to SaaStr, and there's all of these sort of point solutions and bigger things that are sort of going on. We see sort of activity capture and sales management. Look, we always thought that sales reps were going to enter information in the Salesforce. That's never happened. We now see a bunch of point solutions that are helping just automate that activity, and sales ops is actually driving that to get better data. Number two, we sort of see sales workflow tools. Before, we never had CPQ. We just had people entering deals. Now we've gone workflow tools like Trade.io. We see CPQ. Every one of the CRM vendors have sucked up a CPQ vendor, making it more enabled but for the sales rep to sort of close out those deals. Business intelligence. It's amazing. We talk to Series B companies all the time. They now are running sophisticated data warehousing and sort of data modeling tools like a Looker, for instance, and they're all running that from the back office. number three is sort of planning and forecasting tools. We used to just see spreadsheets being passed around, and we used to go ask the reps, like, what are your top 10 accounts that you want to go focus on? And that's a really horrible way to figure out how we're going to go run a sales team. Now, even sort of Series B companies are saying, I need a data-driven approach to how we go plan, how we build out quotas, how we build out our forecast, and how we ask the reps to go execute. So these are the top investments that we see every company purchasing in 2019 and 2020. Now, I mentioned we're going to talk about the key trends. It's really amazing. So we see increasing deal velocity, the point solutions that I just talked about, the role specialization, the plague of bad data, which I think Dharmesh hammered on, I'm gonna hammer on as well, and then revolving sales leadership, all of key trends of why sales ops is now moving to a very strategic role. So think about the velocity of sales deals. Back in the day, we had a SAP rep that wouldn't get out of bed for a less than $1 million deal. Now what we have, and then starting around 2006, 2009, with SaaS, is we had reps that could sell really quickly. They could go to market very quickly. So we just staffed the entire floor with as many reps as we could have, almost boiler room status. Then what we decided was, now that there's so many solutions, we have to sort of step back and think about, we have to deliver value. So what we like to think of is, we used to have pre-SaaS where we went all value, really hard. We spent hours and hours thinking about account plans, thinking about who was in the room. Then volume velocity with Salesforce came in. Everybody was just like, how fast can I get this product to market? Now we're seeing an inflection point. We now have to do volume and velocity. We have to sell, but our buyers are more discerning. They want to understand the value. We have to deliver it quicker and faster. So within the first 5 seconds of the call, we have to start to know that buyer and give them insights and keep that hook. Think about just like now when you're watching a Netflix show, we used to spend 2 or 3 seasons getting to the really exciting parts. Now we know, like Netflix knows, if they don't have you hooked within the first 15 minutes, then you're going to skip on and go to something else. Same thing is happening now in software. I think this is really exciting. We're going to start to see how value-based selling is coming back, and we have to be able to deliver that. So that means, as a sales ops crew, we have to make it as frictionless as possible for the sales rep to be able to deliver that. The proliferation of point solutions. So most of the companies that we talk to have over 22 point solutions in their hand. So they bring all these solutions out, and they look at and they roll this out to the sales rep, and the sales rep has now has fatigue. Every time we go into a customer and we ask the sales rep, what's your biggest problem? They've got 3 screens up. They've got LinkedIn Sales Navigator. They've got their CRM, probably Salesforce, and then they've got Excel, and then they've got a dialer, and they just look at me and they're like, I'm just so exhausted. I don't know where to go and when. And that's really, really a problem. Whenever we now start to talk with customers, they're really understanding, how do I sort of rationalize all of this spend? I want to make it frictionless, but how do I rationalize the spend and make it easy for my sales rep? Next, we have this sort of plague of bad data. The second piece that every customer comes to us with is, how do I go look at a data solution? What's the data companies that I should be paying attention to? We have interesting things happening in that space. Look at DiscoverOrg. They just purchased Zoom Info on Monday, right? They purchased Ranking probably 6 months ago. So we have sort of consolidation in that space. And then we have some interesting movements with that now. So we've got some other hyper-local or sort of nuanced providers like the Bombora Intent Data or Madison Logic. So we have all of this data that sales ops is going and purchasing. And when the sales rep sees it, they have no idea how to sort of rationalize it. They've got intent data over here. They've got sort of lead scoring over here. They've got account data over here. Nothing rationalizes into an account hierarchy. And then as soon as they start to work on an account, somebody gets bought or somebody divests, and so now the entire account structure is ruined. And that really plagues the account rep of, how do I go talk to the person? How do I go have a conversation with them? I would say, honestly, 25% of my time is just defining a rules of the road on where's the account work, like who owns that account, how do we work it, how do we go talk to that account. So it's amazing on just how much effort and time is spent on bad data. The role specialization. right? So as we sort of had volume and velocity, the only sort of way to rationalize a $20,000 deal is to say, hey, we have to have very, very specific role specializations. So we saw the rise of the XDR, sort of sales development, sort of inbound and outbound. We saw a really hyper-segmented group of sales reps. So we saw, emerging small business, mid-market reps, enterprise reps, strategic enterprise reps, and then we saw them hand off to a customer success rep or an account renewal rep. So we see all of this now role of specialization. And what that did was that's a lot of handoffs to happen back and forth. And with that, the sort of customer now, every time they pick up the phone, they realize they're going to be talking to somebody different. So with that, how do we as a sales ops profession make those handoffs seamless so that the customer doesn't feel like they're just being passed back and forth? And then revolving sales leadership. How many people in the room have had a sales leadership change in the past 18 months? Raise your hand. That's literally everyone in the room. So when people became a sales leader, there used to be a sort of 3-year window for them to come in and sort of take the company to the next stage. Now we're seeing it at 18 months, and honestly, in most companies, even that 18-month window is really long. Most VPs of sales come in, you get sort of this first quarter grace window, and then it's like, now how have you impacted the business? And if you haven't impacted the business by the end of the fiscal year, you're out and we're going to bring somebody else in. So the idea of the sort of long-term VP of sales does not happen. A lot of my friends that were VPs of sales have all shifted businesses. I don't know one of my friends that's a VP of sales that has not shifted a job in the past 12 months. And I think this is a fundamental, what's going wrong with this, or what's going right with this, is that there's tension in the marketplace, and how do we solve that is with actual go-to-market, and sales ops can help fix that go-to-market problem. So now we have sort of the challenges of what sales ops faces today. And I think this will resonate with probably everybody in the room. Sales ops used to sort of just be the support role of, hey, you're the person to go add a custom field in Salesforce. You're the person to go run a report. That's now completely shifted. And now the best sales ops people in the world, and I think of like AJ Gandhi at RingCentral, I think of Lena Lee at Glassdoor, now Uber. What they're really doing is it's no longer the support back office role. They're now managing how do we sort of think about the business? How do we make sure that we plan and execute properly so that the sales team is really, really effective and efficient? So that's one of the things that is shifting dramatically as we talk about this. The second piece is the average sales ops tenure is 3 years. We were doing a roadshow with Fullcast, and somebody from Salesforce was like, look, people come out of great colleges, and all they do is they think about, how do I just sort of be in sales ops and then move on to something else? That's going to no longer be the case. People are going to look at sales ops as, this is a career track, and I'm moving into a board level seat or a C-level seat. When we talk to the best run companies and the fastest growing companies, and we go to their board meetings and we're presenting to the board and the VCs in the room, we notice that the best run companies have their sales leader, the CRO, and then right next to them, they have their sales ops leader. So that's now shifted, right? If you would have said that to me 5 years ago, I would have laughed at you and thought that you were absolutely crazy. But now, if they're not in the room, that's actually a very bad sign, and we immediately are like, whoa, where's the sales ops person? Why are they not in the seat? Why are they not making supporting go-to-market decisions with their CRO? Number 3 was that tech stack debt management. I mentioned the 22-point solutions before. We had this sort of explosion of SaaS, in the past 5 years. If you literally just called yourself a SaaS company, a VC was going to give you money. Now when we talk to the VCs, they're like, look, we've got a lot of solutions out there. All of the buyers have this fatigue. The users have fatigue. They want things just to be seamless. All of these apps sort of come together in a clunky UX environment. And at the end of the day, the reps are like, I don't care about any of it. I have 2 things that I have to go do, right? I have to go make appointments, and I have to sort of get my deals closed. If anything gets in my way, I'm just going to stop using that, and I don't care. I'm just going to go figure it out on my own. And it's crazy, by the way, that we're saying this in 2019, that we have too much apps. Like, we would have never thought. We would think that it would keep exploding. But really, now we're starting to see the consolidation because of that fatigue. And then number 4 is low sales ops investment. When we go to the highest growing companies, we say, how much do you guys invest into sales ops, and what does that look like? The first thing that comes out is they say, hey, we really invest in sales ops. We have a sales ops team. They have exactly, they have staying power with the board. They know, the board members know who they are. They're running go-to-market. We spend about 6% of sales budget on sales ops, meaning just the head count. We have a deal desk, and we have sort of processes that we think about here. When we go to companies and we say, tell us about your sales ops environment, and they're spending less than 6%, they don't have a deal desk function, they're not showing up at the boardroom meetings, those are all really key indicators that they've got several broken things in the process. And then when we talk about legacy CRM, everybody, 10 years ago, the VP of sales bought Salesforce, they were really excited, they literally would set it up on a Friday night, they're like, I'm gonna go add 14 custom fields, I've got this. And then they just start throwing different pieces at it. They're like, oh, I need another custom field, oh, I need this. But then nobody pulled back and rationalized all of the things that were being thrown in there. We have, Salesforce was like, hey, we've got to sort of bring in all this data, that's what our customers are asking for. So we had the App Store. Every piece of app came into Salesforce, and they sort of dumped information into the screen. And it was a huge amount of noise and literally no signal. So then reps just looked at it and were like, it takes me 30 seconds to load this page. I don't even do it. I just got my Excel spreadsheet or my Google Docs spreadsheet right here, and that's where I actually work everything. No one starts to think about how do we rationalize the CRM, and like how does that sort of involve our reps on a day-to-day basis, because that's sort of thought as like that's over here, that's not going to make us revenue. It's just going to, it's just this noise piece. But when we look at a really optimized CRM where the reps don't have to enter information and they can just sort of move in and out of it very quickly, that's a sign of a really good, well-run organization. And then poor data quality to sales compliance. Forever, back in the day when we were selling Salesforce, we said, how do we, make the reps just enter information, and they'll automatically just do it, because everybody at Salesforce had information, or we, lost our job. True story. And so then we said, hey, everybody in this world is just going to go enter information. Well, reps were smart, right? Like, you're not going to fire the rep if they don't enter information and they hit their quota. So we have all this information. Nobody's going to enter their information. So now we see activity automation really coming into play, so that we can have all this information about who we're meeting with, what conversations are we having. All those pieces are coming into the Salesforce, and it's being viewed now as how do we sort of capture that all that noise and make really strategic value decisions out of that. And the best companies are saying, hey, we can pull in this information, know who we're talking to, understand sort of some of the data modeling, and do better forecasting and operationalize control. So these are sort of what the challenges are, and I think that as a profession, I think that sales ops is now going to move out of some of those challenges, and it's going to be really exciting now as we enter sort of the golden era of sales ops. And now I want to talk to you about what's coming in the future. One, I think that the first thing is that rationalizing the tech stack. Now as we start to see a massive consolidation in tech with, like I mentioned, DiscoverOrg is a very easy relevant example today. We're seeing sort of consolidation. Every leader is going to have to say, how do I efficiently manage this tech stack? How do I make sure that what I'm putting forward in my reps' hands, making them a better person? And then we're going to use data as a competitive advantage again. And it's no longer just about how can I just go buy a list. There has to be sort of a rationalization. So number one is like intent data. The best sales development reps today and reps are using intent data. They're looking at what the people are searching, so they're informed as what their buyers are doing. And they're able to go prospect way more efficiently than other companies. And then companies are figuring out, like, what's that one key piece of information that makes my business better? I was talking to a payroll firm, a very large public company, and they're like, look, all the data is great. The only thing we matter is when their renewal is up for their 401k. That's all we care about. So we worked with them to have a outsourced firm call up and figure out everybody that was on their list when their renewal rates are. That alone, they have this sort of nice database now, and they just have a 60, 90-day plan from that, and that's how they're able to sort of increase sales 40%. So using what is the one key piece of information or several key pieces of information that's going to make our sales reps more effective. And then number 3, driving growth through account management and CS. So Nick Mehta was on stage last night at Gainsight. We're starting now to see the revision of how do we do account management. Big companies like Microsoft and Salesforce, that never went away, but we had sort of this maniacal focus from the VCs on how do we just drive net new growth. And then now we're realizing, look, the best, easiest source of high margin and good sales are going back to our current customers and asking them to buy more product from us. So making sure that we segment out those properly and drive that growth. That's going to be key in the next 2 to 3 years. And number 3, and the last one is data-driven go-to-market plans. So a lot of customers can tell you who their ideal customer profile is. They can start to tell you what their account segmentation is. But then when we go to start to operationalize it, that all sort of falls apart. So we'll go in as a research and consulting firm. We'll sit down and we'll talk about, okay, here's your ideal customer profile. Here's how we segment. And the sales leader will be like, that's great. Jim, what are your top 10 accounts? And I'm like, guys, so how do we sort of operationalize this? All the way down to the rep level of how do we think about a target account list? How do we segment those out? And how do we do real account planning, not just sort of, oh, I know their NASDAQ symbol and I know their ticker symbol, but how do we do real account plan that drives value? And we can sort of articulate that up through the organization and across to our friends in marketing. Questions? A couple of the leaders are Bombora and Madison Logic, and what the best companies are doing are they're not only looking at who is searching for my firm, who is searching for my competitor firms, but then they're sort of opening up that list a little bit broader. So if we were to take, like for our sales team at TOPO, we look at who's looking at TOPO, who's looking at our sort of competitors like a Serious Decisions or Gartner. Then we're looking at like a couple of the larger pieces. Who's looking at account-based marketing? Who's looking at sales ops? So being able to sort of see all of those signals and then put it into a like Looker or any other BI tool and watching that graph over time. So if one of your key accounts is like Box, you can see how are they sort of searched for all those maybe 5 to 10 different areas over time, and is it getting bigger and is it growing throughout the company? So then you can take that and understand within the company that this is not just a one-time search, that you can sort of see the highlights as it goes further. So I'm incredibly passionate about this, and I get this question all the time. Like this is one of like when we talk to the CEO, one of the first questions they have is, "Great, I've got a sales ops team. Where should they live?" They should absolutely live with the CRO, and the reason for that is they can have finance own sort of the final numbers and the go-to-market and the quota. They can own that, but I want sales ops to live with the CRO, and there's several pieces on that. One is I want them to sort of own the deal desk, and I want them to see the sort of day-to-day things that are happening with the salesperson. The number one thing that happens is finance comes up, and anybody that's been a VP of sales can attest to this and is going to start to laugh. Finance comes up, like they're in this sort of back room, they come up with this great next year revenue numbers, and then they sort of model everything out, and then when you go and start to talk to them as a VP of sales, you're like, okay, what are we thinking about for next year? The numbers are unbelievably insane, and nothing makes sense. And you're like, none of this makes sense. Like logically, I get it, none of it makes sense because they don't understand that bottoms up planning on how to do that. So we need sales ops to live with the CRO, to be with the reps, to understand how it comes up from the bottoms up. Great question. So the next piece we get, and we were talking to the Fullcast guys, and they're like, what should we sort of name this? Sales ops is a little bit of a misnomer. Scott Albro, the CEO of TOPO, got on stage last year and said, look, the number one trend is it's no longer sales ops, it's now customer ops. So the idea of just having marketing and sales together is already still antiquated. We need somebody to look at the entire customer experience, and they need to own that chain. So it's no longer going to just be sales ops. It's going to be marketing, sales, and customer service and renewal. So that whole customer experience, it's going to be customer operations in the future. What I would say to that is, no, we don't. We need to do a rationalization, and I think that like we're getting out of sales kickoff season, right? So what a lot of companies I saw doing were they're like, we're going to go like almost rip and replace fully rationalize what are we thinking about for like UX, like the better UX companies out there like a SalesLoft or Outreach. How do we think about Salesforce as a piece? How do we think about that data layer? And how do we think about that infrastructure layer? So they ran everything as a sandbox, pulled a couple reps aside, and then deployed it, and they're deploying it now as sort of a whole different solution of what they're doing. I think that you're going to end up ripping and replacing because there's so many small changes that you have to make, and if you haven't been making them, it's going to be a really hard struggle for the reps to sort of adapt. And I think Salesforce internally does a great job at sort of making different, like all these little different changes, but I think the rest of the companies have sort of failed to do that. So I think the idea around revenue operations, it's almost like the sort of evolution of a VP of sales. We had just sort of the VP of sales, and then we're like, oh, we're the VP of revenue, and now we have sort of a chief customer officer. So I think when we talk about it as just revenue, it sort of hinders it as it's just marketing and sales and just the pieces that matter, and it's not sort of that full life cycle of how do we think about sort of renewal and account management that sometimes aren't just purely focused on straight renewals. So that's why I think I draw the difference in making sure that we call them customer so that we understand the full life cycle as opposed to you're just how do we monetize you as a customer. So that 6% number, it actually sort of scales really well. So we see like 6 to 8% as sort of some of the better companies. And then the it depends question is how much are you defining under the sales ops? So do they have deal desk? Do they have sales enablement? Like what are you fully defining? So I like how Sage Intacct thinks about their customer ops, right? They have this sort of sales operations role and sales enablement, and they all roll up into Kathy Lord. So if we're talking about sales enablement too, you're going to sort of see almost 10% as a budget item. And so that sort of scales really quickly. And the best companies, I said, even when you're really small, will hire a sales ops person right away to make sure that all of the logistical strategic pieces are taken care of. So on the software, we don't have a good spend on that because everybody gets so many different deals on when they're thinking about it. So we don't have good data on that one. I apologize. In a small company, yes. And once you start to get to a 1,000-person-ish company, they start to move back under IT, but IT is forced to sort of work with them. But in a small company, yes, because the team needs to be agile, so there's going to be new reporting requirements, like we need to add new fields, we need to add new reports. So yes, they'll absolutely sit with under sales ops in a small company. So it doesn't include the technology, that's the headcount piece. The technology doesn't get added in there because when we start to look at when we start looking at the solutions, you don't have good data around like, well, we bought Looker or Tableau as a company, and so like we've got some data pieces there, but like on average we sort of do it at the rep level and not at sort of the sales ops piece. And so from a rep level, companies on average spend about $13,000 per rep on the solution. And that's sort of taking a approach around like, well, if we have Office 365, which is a organizational wide, like how much do we deploy some of those pieces? So we see about $13,000 for a per rep basis on technology. And I think when we go back to like what's plagued sales ops, it used to be just thought of as like you guys are just in the back, sales ops is just in the back room running reports, doing sales CRM admin. And then now it's just coming up as this is actually a strategic growth driver, and you're seeing larger budgets. So I would say probably only at the sort of the top tier companies right now that are fastest growing, like AJ Gandhi at RingCentral has a really high budget and a really expansive team to go make sure. And we were talking about their stock price; it's gone up like 500% in the past 2 years. Like everybody gets excited about the FANG stocks, but if you look at RingCentral, they've done an amazing job there. So when you look at AJ Gandhi's budget, it's much different than sort of a company that's not invested or thinking that sales ops is a strategic arm. Well, that's going to grow up, right? We're going to see a team of like deal desk. We're going to see a team of enablement. It's going to be a sort of sizable function. So we're going to see lots of things roll up to that. So we'll probably see at a 1,000-person company sort of 30 people that are running different key pieces. When we start to see customer ops is probably companies are staying private longer, right? So more of like a stage D or E size company, or when you go public. And even then is really early. So if you're a Series A or B company, you're absolutely just going to hire a VP of sales or a head of sales that's just going to have those 8 to 10, 12 reps underneath them. Not until you've sort of figured out that we can do this really predictable and you've already expanded globally. And so for most companies, that's, you know, either they've gone public or they've gone a really sizable team. So with the chief operating officer, I think those are two very similar roles. I like the COO role that's happening now in the sort of Series B. What happens where companies used to get funded and they're like, we're going to rip out the founding CEO and put in a quote real CEO. And so now what companies have said is like, we're going to do like the Cheryl thing at Facebook, and we're going to put somebody in across product and data as well. So I think that there's sort of a competing level. But I don't have a strong objection to that rolling up to a COO. I think the COO is looking at a much broader, expansive view, so that can roll up to the COO.